Every transaction you make today exists because of a forgotten kingdom that disappeared 2,500 years ago. In ancient Lydia, where rivers ran gold, humanity made a discovery that changed civilization forever. But here's what nobody tells you about the invention of money. It wasn't about wealth or power. It was about solving a problem so fundamental that every merchant and trader would benefit from this one brilliant innovation. Stay with me, because you're about to discover how electrum coins from a vanished kingdom created the economic system that runs our entire world, and why every dollar you spend carries the DNA of this ancient revolution. 20 years after the arrows fell at Hastings, the kingdom that had emerged from invasion bore little resemblance to the realm that Harold had died defending. Where Saxon thanes had once dispensed rough justice in timber halls, continental barons now ruled from stone castles that rose like mountains of carved authority above settlements whose very names were being transformed by the linguistic revolution that accompanied political transformation. Under William's methodical governance, what had begun as military occupation evolved into the most sophisticated administrative system in medieval Europe. The conqueror's genius lay not merely in his ability to win battles, but in his systematic approach to consolidating victory through institutions that would outlast any individual ruler and bind the conquered population to their new masters through bonds stronger than simple force. Castle construction that proceeded with relentless efficiency throughout the conquered territories created a network of fortified strongpoints that served simultaneously as military bases, administrative centers, and symbols of the permanent nature of the transformation that had occurred. From Warwick to Durham, from Exeter to Chester, stone towers proclaimed in a language that needed no translation that the old order had passed away forever. Economic transformation that accompanied political change integrated the island kingdom into trading networks that stretched from the Baltic to the Mediterranean, bringing unprecedented prosperity to regions that embraced the new opportunities, while devastating those that clung too desperately to obsolete traditions. Merchants who learned to navigate the complex relationships between continental overlords and native craftsmen often found riches that their grandfathers could never have imagined. Legal reforms that merged the best elements of continental jurisprudence with local customary law created a hybrid system that would become the foundation of common law throughout the English-speaking world. The conqueror's courts dispensed justice with an efficiency and consistency that gradually won acceptance even among populations that had initially resented any deviation from ancestral practices. Religious changes that brought continental monasticism and cathedral building transformed the spiritual landscape as thoroughly as political upheaval had transformed the secular realm. Where native churches had served local communities with ancient simplicity, continental cathedrals soared toward heaven with architectural ambitions that proclaimed the glory of God and the power of those who served him on earth. Cultural integration proceeded with the inexorable patience of geological change, as continental French gradually became the language of government and high culture, while the native tongue survived among the common people who maintained their ancestral language in field and workshop. The linguistic division that resulted would enrich the conquered language with thousands of words borrowed from its conquerors, creating a hybrid tongue of unprecedented expressiveness. As death approached in the autumn of 1087, the conqueror could survey achievements that had transformed not merely a kingdom, but the entire balance of power in northwestern Europe. The bastard who had gambled everything on a single invasion had created a cross-channel empire that would influence European politics for centuries, while establishing institutions that would shape the development of law, government, and culture throughout the medieval world. In September of that final year, as William lay dying in Rouen from injuries sustained in a campaign that had begun like so many others, but ended in unexpected catastrophe. The question of succession that had driven him to conquest 21 years earlier now haunted his own dynasty. The three sons who gathered around his deathbed represented different aspects of his complex legacy. Robert Curthose inherited the duchy that had made conquest possible. William Rufus received the kingdom that conquest had won, while young Henry waited with the patience that would eventually bring him both. Thus ended the life of the man who had changed the course of medieval history through a combination of ruthless ambition, tactical brilliance, and administrative genius that medieval chroniclers would struggle to capture in mere words. The invasion was complete, its architect departing a world that his vision had transformed beyond recognition, leaving behind institutions and innovations that would influence the development of Western civilization for centuries to come. The Domesday Survey, that stands as perhaps the conqueror's most enduring monument to systematic governance, had been completed just months before his death, creating a record of resources and obligations that represented the culmination of 20 years spent transforming a conquered territory into an efficiently administered realm. No medieval government had ever possessed such detailed knowledge of its subjects' wealth and capabilities, and none would again until the development of modern statistical methods. Land redistribution that had begun immediately after Hastings reached its logical conclusion in the final years of the reign, as the last native estates passed into continental hands and the transformation of the landed classes was completed. Where once native earls had ruled territories that resembled independent principalities, continental barons now held their estates as tenants-in-chief, whose obligations to the crown were precisely defined and ruthlessly enforced. Administrative innovations that had evolved from the practical necessities of governing a hostile population matured into sophisticated systems of record-keeping, taxation, and law enforcement that would be copied throughout medieval Europe. The exchequer that managed royal finances, the chancery that issued royal documents, and the courts that dispensed royal justice all represented advances in governmental efficiency that reflected the conqueror's talent for transforming military victory into lasting political achievement. Military organization that had made victory possible was refined into a feudal system that provided the crown with more reliable military service than any previous monarch had enjoyed. The knight service obligations that continental landholders owed in exchange for their estates created a professional military class whose loyalty was reinforced by self-interest and whose effectiveness had been proven in the crucible of war and consolidation. Social transformation that accompanied political change created a new hierarchy that blended continental concepts of feudal obligation with native traditions of personal loyalty, producing a social order that was more rigid in theory than in practice, and more stable than either of its component traditions might have achieved alone. The intermarriage between continental settlers and local natives that gradually occurred, despite initial hostility, created a genuinely integrated nobility within 2 generations of invasion. Architectural achievements that marked the conqueror's reign transformed the physical appearance of the kingdom as thoroughly as political change had transformed its governance. The great cathedrals that rose at Durham and Winchester, the massive keeps that dominated London and Colchester, and the hundreds of parish churches that were rebuilt in the continental style, all testified to the permanence of the transformation that had occurred and the confidence of those who had accomplished it. Cultural synthesis that emerged from the collision between continental and native civilizations produced innovations in literature, law, and learning that neither tradition could have achieved independently. The historical writing that flourished under royal patronage, the legal precedents that were established in royal courts, and the architectural styles that were developed by continental builders all represented genuine advances that justified invasion through achievement rather than mere force. Economic prosperity that followed political stability brought wealth to regions that had been devastated by the chaos of war and consolidation. Trade that had been disrupted by warfare resumed on a scale that exceeded anything the native kingdom had known, while agricultural production recovered and expanded under the systematic management that continental landlords imposed upon their newly acquired estates. The legacy that the conqueror bequeathed to his successors and to history was thus far more complex and enduring than the simple substitution of one ruling dynasty for another. The invasion had created new forms of government, new approaches to law and justice, new architectural styles, and new cultural syntheses that would influence the development of Western civilization long after the political circumstances that had made them possible were forgotten. The bastard duke who had won a crown through war had transformed himself into one of the great constructive statesmen of the medieval world. King Suppiluliuma II draws his bronze sword for the final time as enemy warriors pour through the splintered gates of Hattusa, their wild hair streaming behind iron-pointed spears that gleam like lightning in the smoke-filled air. The last ruler of the Hittites stands atop his crumbling palace steps, purple robes torn and blood-stained, swinging his blade in desperate arcs that find their mark again and again, yet cannot stem the tide of destruction that engulfs his capital. His death cry echoes off walls carved with images of gods who have abandoned their people, while enemy axes hack at the Lion Gate until even those stone guardians split and fall. Flames consume the royal archives where clay tablets explode like pottery grenades in heat that melts bronze ornaments into shapeless lumps, their cuneiform characters becoming ash that swirls through corridors where scribes once recorded the tribute of nations. An elderly clerk clutches surviving tablets to his chest, while stumbling through passages choked with debris and corpses, his reed stylus snapping between fingers that will never again write imperial commands. Behind him, shelves that held the memory of empires collapse in showers of sparks, while raiders reduce centuries of accumulated wisdom to glowing embers. Through mountain passes stream refugees whose ox carts groan under loads of salvaged treasures and traumatized children, their procession marking the death of a world that seemed as permanent as the peaks themselves. A former provincial governor stumbles along rocky trails his sandaled feet have never touched, supported by servants who abandoned their posts rather than face flames that consume everything they served. The bronze seal of office that once commanded instant obedience across 3 provinces bounces uselessly at his belt as he learns the democracy of survival. Down in the valleys, where the Hermus carries golden sand toward the wine-dark sea, Ionian watchers count pillars of smoke that rise from distant cities like funeral pyres for civilization itself. Chief Cadmos grips his bronze spear while studying horizons painted red with reflected flames, his weathered face calculating how long these mountains might shelter his people from storms that devour empires. Around him, warriors sharpen iron points while listening to tales that refugees carry from the burning world beyond their protective peaks. At the river crossing that will one day bear the name Sardis, the first imperial fugitives stumble through gates opened by cautious hospitality, their silk robes torn and stained with dust from collapsed palaces. A Hittite smith demonstrates iron-working techniques to village craftsmen whose eyes widen like children witnessing magic, his scarred hands shaping metal that holds edges sharper than bronze yet costs less than copper to produce. The hammer blows that ring from mountain forges announce technological revolution as profound as the political upheaval that enables its spread. Bronze weapons clatter to the ground as Myonian warriors test iron blades that slice through enemy shields, like hot knives through tallow, their amazement mixing with grim satisfaction at possessing advantages their enemies cannot match. The valley fighters who learn these improved techniques train in mountain meadows where their ancestors herded cattle, yet their new weapons transform farmers into soldiers capable of standing against any force that threatens their independence. Spear points that never dull and sword edges that never chip provide confidence that transforms defensive thinking into dreams of expansion. Smoke signals rise from watchtowers built on commanding peaks, where beacon fires carry messages faster than mounted couriers, their coded meanings warning allied settlements of approaching dangers while coordinating responses across territories that lack central authority. The guards who maintain these positions sleep with weapons ready and eyes scanning horizons where dust clouds might announce approaching enemies. Their vigilance protects commerce that binds scattered communities together through relationships more durable than imperial taxation. Sacred ceremonies conducted in forest groves blend Hittite hymns with indigenous chants older than written memory, their mixed voices rising toward gods who must choose between abandoning worshippers and adapting to transformed circumstances. A refugee priest leads rituals that honor both the storm god, whose temple burned in the capital, and local deities whose protection proved more reliable than imperial might. Incense smoke carries prayers in languages spanning the scattered territories, creating spiritual bonds that transcend political boundaries. Wedding processions wind through mountain passes as marriages unite families from different valleys, their celebrations creating alliances stronger than military cooperation, while preserving distinct traditions within expanding confederations. The bride, who travels from coastal settlements to highland strongholds, carries gifts that demonstrate maritime prosperity. Bronze ornaments shaped by techniques unknown in mountain workshops, shells whose iridescent surfaces catch light like captured rainbows. Her union produces children who inherit multiple identities, along with territories spanning from peaks to seashores. Harvest festivals draw communities together for celebrations that demonstrate abundance, enabling generous gestures toward neighbors facing temporary hardships. Their shared feasts proving that cooperation yields greater prosperity than competition for limited resources. The dancing that accompanies these gatherings moves to rhythms incorporating musical traditions from scattered territories, while young people who meet at celebrations often discover marriage partners whose unions strengthen bonds between allied settlements. Bronze drums beaten with sticks carved from sacred groves provide rhythms that make hearts beat in harmony. Iron plowshares bite deep into valley soils as farmers apply techniques learned from refugees who once managed temple estates in vanished cities, their improved agriculture supporting populations larger than these lands have ever sustained. The terraced fields that climb impossible slopes demonstrate engineering knowledge that transforms vertical wilderness into productive gardens, while irrigation channels carved with mathematical precision ensure every seed receives its share of seasonal rains. Granaries built with salvaged stones from imperial monuments store surpluses that enable craft specialization. Councils of war convene when raiders threaten territories too extensive for individual settlements to defend alone, their deliberations producing strategies that coordinate responses across valleys, whose chiefs maintain independence while acknowledging common interests. The bronze-tipped spears that warriors contribute to these assemblies represent personal commitments to collective defense, while oaths sworn before multiple gods witness promises that transcend tribal loyalties. Plans emerging from these meetings enable swift mobilization when beacon fires announce approaching dangers. Workshops cluster around water sources, where streams provide power for grinding grain and tempering metal, their locations chosen for practical advantages that enable production efficiencies impossible in scattered family operations. Hammers ring in valleys that announce prosperity, returning to regions devastated by collapse, while sparks flying from anvils illuminate faces determined to rebuild what destruction scattered. Apprentices learning these crafts carry skills enabling independence from foreign suppliers who might fail when most needed. Years pass like seasons in a cycle that gradually transforms survival into prosperity, adaptation into innovation, scattered refugees into unified peoples who remember their origins while embracing their potential. The Maeonians, who inherit this complex legacy, possess technological knowledge, accumulated wealth, administrative skills, and military capabilities that surpass anything their ancestors achieved under foreign rule. In valleys where iron tools cultivate abundant harvests and defensive alliances ensure security, the foundations of future greatness solidify like cooled metal shaped by patient hammers. Gyges, heir to leadership earned through generations of wise choices and successful adaptation, surveys territories that stretch from mountain peaks to coastal plains, their prosperity evident in filled granaries and busy workshops. The electrum that glitters in streams below his fortress awaits rulers with vision sufficient to recognize revolutionary potential in nature's gifts, while accumulated knowledge and inherited alliances provide foundations for innovations that will transform commerce throughout the ancient world. What began as desperate flight from imperial collapse has become confident preparation for achievements that will establish new forms of dominion. In the flicker of torchlight, King Candaules unsheathes his sword, shadows leaping across walls etched with Heracles' struggle against the lion, the weapon shaking in hands untouched by true battle. The last of the Heraclids paces across marble floors stained with wine from the evening's feast, his purple robes rustling with each nervous step, while beyond palace walls his people sleep in ignorance of conspiracy that will end their dynasty before dawn breaks. His breath comes short and quick like a hunted animal's, as he rehearses words that must convince his most trusted bodyguard to witness his wife's beauty. Atop Mount Tmolus, where ancient springs feed streams that carry electrum toward the valley floor, an old shepherd watches lights of the royal stronghold flicker like fallen stars in darkness below. His grandfather once served the Atyads, that mysterious first dynasty whose origins blur into legend and whose achievements live only in songs that grow more elaborate with each telling. The crook in his weathered hands bears fittings marked with symbols older than writing, while his flock grazes on slopes where heroes once walked and gods left footprints in solid stone. War cries echo from distant valleys, where Cimmerian raiders test defenses of settlements too weak to resist their hunger for plunder and slaves. These horse-riding warriors from steppes beyond the Black Sea strike like wolves against scattered prey, their curved swords slicing through resistance with edges honed to razor sharpness. Village watchmen light beacon fires that warn of approaching danger, yet too often signals arrive after destruction has claimed another farming community whose harvest feeds only ravens. Warriors charge across courtyards where recruits learn to wield weapons forged in royal workshops, their training supervised by veterans whose scars tell stories of battles fought against enemies ranging from mountain bandits to foreign armies. The young men who practice here come from farms and fishing villages throughout the growing realm, their loyalty bought with promises of land grants rather than ancient bonds of kinship that once tied subjects to kings. Spear points ring against shields in practice combats that prepare fighters for warfare, where mistakes mean death. Stone walls rise higher around Sardis as each generation adds to fortifications that began as simple earthworks topped with wooden palisades. Master masons who learned their craft studying ruins of Hittite cities shape limestone blocks with precision that would humble later architects, their techniques creating joints so tight that no mortar fills gaps, yet structures stand solid as the mountain itself. These defensive improvements reflect practical wisdom earned through watching neighboring settlements burn, while their own walls proved adequate to deter raiders. Smiths forge weapons in workshops built against the citadel's inner walls, their furnaces burning charcoal that fills air with smoke and promise of military superiority over enemies who still depend upon copper implements. The master armorer who supervises these activities learned his trade from Hittite refugees, whose techniques now serve Lydian ambitions, his apprentices creating spear points that pierce any shield, and sword blades that hold edges through seasons of combat. Metal bars cooling in water basins hiss like serpents as material transforms from liquid fire into solid strength. Merchant caravans loaded with precious goods wind through passes where sentries challenge all travelers, yet wave through recognized dealers whose honesty has been proven across years of profitable exchange. Pack animals that carry electrum dust and woolen textiles follow routes connecting mountain settlements to coastal ports, their bells ringing melodies that announce prosperity, advancing through territories where cooperation has replaced competition. Guards who escort these valuable cargoes wear mail that turns aside arrows, while their spear points discourage bandits. Harvest celebrations bring together communities that have learned to share abundance during seasons when individual settlements might face shortages. Their festivals demonstrating prosperity that enables generous gestures toward allies facing temporary difficulties. Young people who meet at these gatherings often discover marriage partners from distant valleys, their unions creating kinship bonds that strengthen political alliances while preserving traditions within expanding confederations. Dancing continues through nights illuminated by torches that burn oils pressed from olives grown on terraced cliffsides. Treasury officials count golden ornaments and silver vessels that fill chambers carved from living rock beneath the citadel, their careful records documenting wealth that accumulates through successful governance rather than tribute extracted from conquered populations. The scribes who maintain these accounts work by lamplight that flickers against walls decorated with frescoes depicting Heraclids' 12 labors, their reed pens scratching across papyrus that preserves evidence of prosperity, enabling ambitious projects. Scales weigh precious metals whose purity rivals anything produced in royal mints. Diplomatic envoys return from missions to neighboring realms, bearing gifts that demonstrate respect while establishing relationships beneficial to all participants. Their success measured in agreements that facilitate trade while deterring aggression. The treaties they negotiate create networks of alliance that enable collective defense against common enemies, while preserving independence for communities that value self-governance above imperial protection. Wax seals that authenticate these documents bear images blending Lydian symbols with designs honoring partners' traditions. Palace guards discover conspirators meeting in wine cellars, where amphorae imported from Greek islands provide cover for whispered conversations that plot dynastic change. Captain Gyges investigates these gatherings, while recognizing voices belonging to men whose loyalty he never questioned. Their words revealing ambitions that threaten not merely the current ruler, but entire bloodlines claiming descent from divine heroes. His spear remains steady in hands that must choose between warning his king and preserving relationships with subordinates whose support enables effective command. through sacred groves where oak trees older than civilization provide shelter for religious ceremonies. Pilgrims arrive seeking divine guidance for decisions that will reshape regional politics. The priests who serve these natural temples preserve oral traditions that trace royal genealogies back to legendary founders, their memories containing stories that legitimize current rulers while providing precedents for future claimants. Sacred springs that bubble from rocky clefts offer purification to petitioners whose offerings include precious metals, demonstrating both piety and prosperity. Foreign ambassadors present credentials in throne rooms, where tapestries woven with golden thread depict scenes from epic poetry, their diplomatic pouches containing letters that acknowledge Lydian strength, while proposing relationships benefiting all participants. The gifts they offer: ivory carvings from distant lands, precious stones that capture light like frozen fire, exotic spices that flavor royal banquets, demonstrate their rulers' desire to maintain peaceful relationships with a realm whose power grows each passing season. Wine cups shared during negotiations create bonds surviving political changes. Twilight gatherings in royal gardens provide opportunities for informal discussions that often prove more significant than formal court sessions. Their relaxed atmosphere encouraging honest conversation between rulers and advisors whose counsel shapes policy. The king, who walks among flowering bushes planted by predecessors, seeks guidance for decisions determining whether his dynasty survives or joins the Atyads in historical obscurity. Fountain waters that sparkle in torchlight provide music for conversations balancing tradition against innovation. Training exercises conducted in palace courtyards prepare young nobles for responsibilities, extending beyond personal advancement to encompass service for common good. Their education blending military skills with administrative knowledge needed for governing expanding territories. These future leaders practice sword work in shadows cast by statues honoring Heraclids, their blades flashing in movements combining deadly efficiency with aesthetic grace. Instruction they receive prepares them for roles in campaigns, testing whether Lydian strength can project itself beyond defensive necessities toward offensive opportunities. Gyges stands in shadows at assembly edges, his position as bodyguard captain providing access to conversations that reveal dynastic weaknesses alongside personal opportunities for advancement. The armor that marks his rank gleams dully in lamplight, while his mind weighs loyalty against ambition, duty against desire for power that grows stronger with each demonstration of royal incompetence. His hand rests on sword hilt, while eyes measure distances between current circumstances and future possibilities that bold action might create. A moment of transformation looms, ready to cast aside ancient lineages and replace them with houses founded on merit instead of legend. In chambers where conspiracy ripens like fruit on poisoned trees, where loyalty wars with ambition in hearts that must choose between preservation and revolution, the last act of one age prepares to yield to opening scenes of another. The citadel that rises above golden streams awaits rulers whose vision matches opportunities surrounding them. Within the chamber, lit by wavering lamps, their glow dancing over images of heavenly desire, Candoles cast aside his robes, his trembling hands bearing a body softened by comfort. The last of the Heraclids turns toward his bodyguard captain, with eyes bright from wine and madness, his voice thick with obsession as he speaks words that will destroy his dynasty. Gyges, I think you do not believe me when I speak of my wife's beauty. Men trust their ears less than their eyes. You must see her naked. The bronze-bound door stands open behind them, like the mouth of fate itself. Blood pools beneath the dying Heraclid's body as his most trusted guardian drives the blade deeper into royal flesh. The bronze point finding the heart that loved unwisely and ruled poorly. Gyges wipes crimson from his sword, while Queen Nysia watches from the doorway, her silk nightrobe clutched tight against skin that trembles with shock and relief in equal measure. The lamp flames flicker as if the gods themselves recoil from regicide, yet the deed stands accomplished, and the ancient bloodline ends with gurgling breath that echoes off marble floors stained with dynastic failure. Cimmerian arrows whistle through morning air as nomad raiders test the defenses of border settlements that have grown complacent under royal protection, their bronze points seeking gaps in shields held by farmers who learned warfare from necessity rather than choice. The horsemen who loose these shafts ride like centaurs across meadows where cattle scatter in terror, their wild cries echoing off mountains that have never heard such savage music. Village militias that attempt to stand against this mounted fury discover that courage alone cannot overcome superior mobility and weapons designed for killing rather than ceremony. Palace doors swing wide as the new king enters halls where his predecessor's blood still darkens polished stones, his footsteps echoing with authority earned through decisive action rather than inherited through divine bloodlines. The man who was captain becomes monarch through violence that shocks even those who plotted revolution. Yet his first commands demonstrate wisdom that justifies the terrible means employed to achieve necessary ends. Servants who once bowed to condoles now prostrate themselves before the usurper, whose bronze sword drips with royal blood. Greek mercenaries disembark from ships that crowd the harbour, where Lydian gold purchases services that native warriors cannot provide, their bronze armour glinting in sunlight as they form ranks that will transform regional warfare through superior discipline and equipment. Captain Alcander leads these hired soldiers, whose loyalty belongs to whoever pays their wages promptly and generously, his scarred face speaking of battles fought from Sicily to the Black Sea in service of kings whose names he has forgotten. The spears they carry bear points forged in workshops that serve professional armies rather than citizen militias. Gold coins bearing the new king's image emerge from royal mints, where craftsmen experiment with stamping techniques that will revolutionize how wealth changes hands, their hammered surfaces displaying lions that symbolize strength while guaranteeing value through royal authority. The precious metal that feeds these innovations comes from streams where patient workers pan gravels, that yield electrum in quantities sufficient to fund ambitions that extend far beyond mere survival. Each gleaming disc represents power that can be divided, transported, and accumulated in ways that raw metal cannot match. Servants flee, burning farmsteads, as Cimmerian raids penetrate deeper into territories that seem secure behind mountain barriers, their terror-filled voices carrying news of destruction that tests the new dynasty's ability to protect subjects who exchanged loyalty for security. The ox carts that bear refugees toward the citadel groan under loads of salvaged possessions and traumatized children whose cries pierce air thick with smoke from houses that sheltered families for generations. Behind them, flames consume harvests that will never feed royal granaries or support ambitious building projects. War drums beat from the citadel's highest tower as the usurper summons forces that will demonstrate whether revolution has strengthened or weakened Lydian military capability, their rhythmic pounding echoing off walls where guards who served the previous dynasty now pledge allegiance to rulers whose authority rests on competence rather than mythical descent. The bronze-covered instruments that sound these calls to arms bear symbols that blend traditional designs with innovations, reflecting changed circumstances and fresh ambitions that drive expansion beyond defensive necessities. Lightning illuminates battlefields where Lydian warriors clash with nomad raiders beneath skies that weep rain mixed with blood. The storm's fury matching human violence as men struggle for dominion over valleys that have known peace for longer than living memory can recall. Thunder masks the screams of dying horses and wounded fighters, while flashes reveal scenes of carnage that would haunt peaceful dreams if any combatant survives to sleep again. Mud that forms from rain and gore creates treacherous footing where bronze-shod feet slip between life and death. Queen Nicia screams in labour pains that bring forth an heir to the throne seized through regicide, her cries echoing through chambers where midwives work by lamplight that flickers like uncertain hope. The child that emerges from royal loins carries blood that blends Heraclid heritage with Mermnad ambition, his first breath drawing air that still carries the scent of his grandfather's assassination. Priests who attend the birth speak prayers that invoke protection for dynasties built on violence, while seeking divine approval for bloodlines established through necessary but unholy actions. Dawn reveals corpses scattered across meadows, where Cimmerian raids met resistance from Greek mercenaries, whose bronze-tipped spears proved superior to nomad weapons designed for hit-and-run tactics, rather than sustained combat. The professional soldiers who survived the night's fighting strip valuable equipment from enemy dead while counting their own losses in calculations that balance cost against benefit. Bodies that feed ravens and wolves provide grim testimony to warfare's evolution, from amateur enthusiasm to professional competence that measures success in practical rather than heroic terms. Palace workshops buzz with activity as craftsmen forge weapons and ornaments that demonstrate royal wealth while serving practical needs of expanding administration, their hammers ringing against anvils that shape both tools of war and symbols of peaceful prosperity. The master smiths who supervise these operations blend techniques learned from various sources, creating hybrid technologies that serve Lydian requirements better than any single tradition could provide. Sparks that fly from heated metal illuminate faces determined to build lasting greatness from opportunities that revolution has created. Diplomatic missions depart from gates that open onto roads connecting the capital to allied settlements throughout territories where unified command replaces the chaos that followed imperial collapse. Their sealed pouches containing letters that coordinate activities across regions whose cooperation ensures mutual security. The envoys who carry these communications ride horses bred for speed and endurance, their bronze-tipped spears gleaming in sunlight that illuminates paths leading toward negotiations that will determine whether expansion proceeds through conquest or alliance. Temple construction demonstrates prosperity sufficient to support elaborate religious projects, despite military expenses that drain treasuries faster than tribute can refill them. The rising walls proving that successful governance creates surplus wealth even during periods of active warfare. Stone masons who shape these sacred structures work with materials quarried from mountainsides where refugees first found shelter, their techniques blending architectural knowledge from various sources into forms uniquely adapted to Lydian requirements and aesthetic preferences. Treasure chambers fill with precious objects that demonstrate both military success and commercial prosperity, their contents ranging from enemy weapons captured in battle to exotic goods acquired through peaceful exchange with distant partners. The scribes who catalogue these accumulating riches work by lamplight that reveals abundance sufficient to fund ventures that will establish Lydian influence throughout the region. Silver vessels and golden ornaments reflect flames that illuminate faces marked by confidence in futures that bold leadership might create from present opportunities. Night falls over Sardis, where the new dynasty establishes patterns of governance that will endure for generations. The torches that burn along palace walls illuminating windows where lights mark the locations of power, in a realm transformed by violence into something approaching true greatness. In chambers where conspiracy once ripened like poison fruit, advisors now plan campaigns that will test whether Mermnad ambition can achieve what Heraclid tradition never attempted. The revolution that began with a single sword thrust has created possibilities that stretch beyond valleys toward horizons where future conquests await leaders bold enough to seize them. Flames devour the cedar beams of the royal palace, while Cimmerian horsemen thunder through streets where Lydian citizens flee toward mountain caves, their wild cries echoing off walls that have never heard such savage music. The nomad chieftain who leads this assault sits his mount like a centaur born for war, his bronze-scaled armor reflecting fires that consume libraries where scribes preserved the wisdom of ages. His curved sword drips with royal blood as he rides through courtyards where King Ardes once held audiences that decided the fate of distant territories. Young Ardes draws his father's sword from its bronze scabbard, while standing knee-deep in ash that was once his inheritance, the blade trembling in hands that have known only ceremonial combat until this moment when survival depends upon skill, earned through necessity rather than noble birth. Around him, palace guards who survived the initial assault search for weapons among debris that marks the end of peaceful prosperity and the beginning of trials that will test whether the Mermnad dynasty possesses strength to rebuild what enemies destroyed. The iron spear points that glitter in his remaining warrior's hands represent the only authority he commands in a realm reduced to rubble. Cimmerian warriors charge through the citadel's broken gates with torches that transform royal chambers into furnaces, their bronze-tipped lances seeking flesh, while their horses' hooves strike sparks from marble floors, where queens once walked in silk slippers. The captain who commands these destroyers learned his trade in steppes, where winter winds freeze the blood of weaker peoples, his tactical knowledge enabling assaults that reduce fortifications to memory within single days. Behind him, raiders load ox carts with treasures that will never again grace royal ceremonies or fund ambitious building projects. Blood spatters across limestone altars, where priests offer desperate prayers to gods who seem deaf to mortal suffering. The sacred precincts that once knew only peaceful offerings, now witnessing violence that transforms worship into desperate pleas for divine intervention. An elderly cleric clutches golden vessels to his chest, while flames consume tapestries depicting Heracles' labors, his aged hands shaking as he attempts to preserve sacred objects through destruction that levels everything around them. Incense smoke mixes with ash from burning cedar as centuries of accumulated piety dissolve in single moments of nomad fury. Ships from Miletus approach Lydian harbors, where merchants once traded in friendship, their bronze-reinforced prows cutting through waters that carry the smell of burning cities, on winds that blow from shores where civilization dies in screams and flame. Captain Histiaeus commands vessels loaded with warriors whose discipline contrasts sharply with Cimmerian chaos, their training transforming farmers into soldiers capable of exploiting opportunities that disaster creates for ambitious neighbors. The oars that drive these warships toward shore bite deep into waves that will soon run red with blood, from conflicts between peoples who once exchanged gifts in peace. Greek mercenaries march through mountain passes, where their bronze armor catches sunlight, their disciplined ranks demonstrating military science that transforms warfare from individual heroism into coordinated group action that overwhelms amateur resistance. These professional soldiers carry weapons forged in workshops that serve armies, rather than ceremonial guards, their spear points designed for penetrating enemy formations, while their shields interlock to create advancing walls that move like slow earthquakes across battlefields. The captain who leads them understands that employment awaits those who possess skills that desperate rulers need for survival. Palace servants flee through corridors, where enemy torches threaten tapestries woven with golden thread, their terror-filled voices joining choruses of lamentation that rise from valleys where imperial collapse has shattered every certainty except death itself. The old steward who once managed royal households now carries children too young to run, his silk robes torn and stained with soot from burning treasuries, where he counted wealth that seemed as permanent as mountains. Behind him, flames consume records that documented the tribute of nations, their parchment feeding fires that reduce administrative wisdom to glowing embers. Dawn reveals corpses scattered across courtyards where defenders made their final stand against enemies who showed no mercy to age or innocence. The pale light illuminating scenes of carnage that would haunt peaceful dreams if any survivor possessed leisure for sleep. Wounded defenders who lived through the night's horror attempt to organize resistance from positions among ruins, their bronze spears pointing towards skies that weep, rain mixed with ashes from burning civilization. The young king who emerges from this devastation carries authority earned through blood, rather than inherited through ancient bloodlines. Thunder crashes overhead as summer storms drench battlefields, where Lydian survivors count costs that exceed any previous disaster in their people's memory. The violent weather matching human fury that has transformed prosperous valleys into landscapes of destruction. Lightning illuminates faces marked by determination that transforms despair into resolve, while rain that falls on heated stones creates steam that rises like souls departing mortal flesh. The prince who will become Atyads stands among warriors whose loyalty survives catastrophes that might have broken lesser bonds between rulers and subjects. Merchant vessels loaded with grain and weapons arrive at harbors where warehouses once sheltered goods from 3 continents, their captains understanding that profit now lies in providing necessities rather than exotic luxuries that previously filled commercial centers. The bronze scales that weigh these essential transactions measure survival rather than prosperity, while negotiations conducted among ruins establish relationships based on mutual need rather than ceremonial courtesy. Trade goods that fill these ships enable reconstruction that will determine whether Lydian civilization persists or joins vanished empires in historical obscurity. An old priest saves scrolls from the burning temple by stuffing them inside his robes, while flames consume wooden shelves that held hymns in languages older than empire, his flesh blistering as he rescues wisdom that would otherwise perish with its guardians. The sacred texts he preserves contain genealogies that trace royal bloodlines back through generations, their survival ensuring continuity between destroyed past and uncertain future. His burns heal slowly, yet the knowledge he protects proves more valuable than gold to communities that must rebuild their spiritual as well as material foundations. Wounded defenders who survive the assault organize themselves into units capable of harassing retreating raiders, their pursuit of fleeing enemies demonstrating that Lydian resistance possesses reserves of strength that surprise nomads accustomed to facing peoples who collapse at first serious reverse. The iron weapons they salvage from battlefield dead provide advantages that compensate for their smaller numbers, while knowledge of local terrain enables ambush tactics that extract vengeance from enemies who thought conquest complete. Blood that flows into golden streams carries away lives from both sides as neither achieves decisive victory. Greek soldiers establish camps on hills overlooking ruined settlements where their bronze spears glitter like deadly stars against skies darkened by smoke from burning cities. Their presence announcing new phases in conflicts that will reshape regional politics through violence and negotiation. The mercenary captain who commands these professionals learned his trade serving various masters. His scarred face speaking of battles fought from Sicily to the Black Sea in service of kings whose names time has forgotten. His men prepare weapons while studying terrain that will determine whether employment brings profit or death. Cimmerian horsemen retreat through passes where their wounded cry for help that will not come. Their plunder-laden wagons slowing movement that enables pursuing enemies to inflict casualties on raiders who thought themselves invulnerable to retaliation from settled peoples. The nomad chief who led the assault discovers that victory brings responsibilities as well as rewards. His authority challenged by subordinates who question decisions that expose them to unnecessary dangers. Behind him, smoke columns mark settlements that will rebuild stronger than before, their destruction teaching lessons that future defenses incorporate. Flames consume the last standing walls of structures that house generations of royal dreams. Yet from their ashes emerges determination that will forge new forms of greatness from opportunities that catastrophe creates for leaders bold enough to seize them. King Alyattes, heir to devastation, an inheritor of hard-won wisdom, stands among advisors whose counsel balances caution learned through recent disasters against ambition that seeks to transform defensive survival into offensive expansion. The golden streams that carry Electrum toward the sea continue flowing despite political upheavals, their treasures awaiting rulers with vision sufficient to recognize revolutionary potential in materials that previous generations valued only for ornamental purposes. From necessity come inventions that ripple far beyond local gain, redefining commerce itself as those driven by survival, perceive opportunities invisible to those cushioned by ease. Stonemasons shape blocks for the monument that will dwarf all previous royal tombs, their hammers ringing against limestone quarried from sacred mountains where gods supposedly walked among mortals. Alyattes rides among these workers on his war horse, the animal's hooves striking sparks from granite chips scattered like offerings to divine architects. His iron-tipped spear catches sunlight as he gestures toward measurements that must achieve perfection. The burial mound, rising under his supervision, will span 600 feet across its base, requiring more labor than building entire cities. Each stone must be positioned with mathematical precision, creating a monument that proclaims royal power beyond the reach of death itself. From this construction site, the king observes siege engines being tested in workshops where bronze gears mesh with wooden frameworks. His chief engineer demonstrates catapults capable of hurling stones heavy enough to shatter any masonry, explaining modifications that promise success where 11 years of previous attempts achieved only costly stalemate. Greek defenders watch these preparations from ramparts where Captain Hittites counts enemy engines, while calculating how long his walls might survive. The Milesian warriors who man these defenses inherited their spears from fathers who fought the first Lydian attacks over a decade ago. Behind them, women and children crowd temples where smoke rises continuously from altars burning offerings for divine protection. Median envoys approach the capital bearing proposals that could transform regional warfare into coordinated expansion. King Cyrus sends ambassadors whose silk robes demonstrate Eastern prosperity, their diplomatic pouches containing treaties that balance mutual benefit against competing ambitions. The pavilion where Alyattes receives these representatives overlooks construction sites, where monuments proclaim achievements requiring diplomatic expansion to reach their natural conclusions. Under royal supervision, engineers labored on earthworks intended to break fortresses, designed with knowledge gathered from Greek defensive traditions. The ramps rise higher each day, their slopes calculated to bring battering rams within range of walls that have never faced such systematic assault. Workers drag stones up these inclined planes while singing songs that blend construction rhythms with military cadences. Cyaxares himself arrives as siege preparations near completion, his cavalry escort raising dust clouds visible from both construction sites and enemy ramparts. The Median ruler dismounts within bowshot of walls, where Greek archers track his movements, his confidence demonstrating mutual respect that enables negotiation during active warfare. His conference with Alyattes takes place in a tent pitched between siege engines and monument construction. Wine flows during their discussions, vintage from vineyards that survived nomad raids through careful cultivation. Both rulers understand that persistence proves essential for lasting achievement rather than temporary conquest. The location of their meeting symbolizes how present military necessity serves future memorial ambition, while diplomatic innovation creates possibilities transcending immediate tactical concerns. The sun darkens at midday, while armies position themselves beside the Halys, celestial events transforming military maneuvers into religious experiences that pause warfare as soldiers stare skyward. This eclipse catches warriors from both sides preparing for battle that suddenly seems insignificant beneath cosmic demonstrations of divine power. Bronze weapons gleam like stars against unnatural twilight, falling across landscapes where political boundaries blur into theological questions. Alyattes raises his spear toward the obscured solar disk, while his Median ally calls for priests who must interpret omens in shadows, stretching across territories where Lydian expansion meets established kingdoms. The darkness that engulfs armies also illuminates minds recognizing messages too clear for mortal ambition to ignore safely. The peace negotiations begin before normal daylight returns, both rulers understanding that gods who darken the sun send communications requiring immediate diplomatic response. The treaty establishing eastern boundaries at exactly the spot where eclipse shadows fell. Deepest transforms potential battlefield into permanent frontier. Scribes document these arrangements by torchlight, their reed pens recording oaths witnessed by priests whose different traditions nevertheless recognize identical divine approval. In the temples, priests blessed the new altars, memorials of victories that ended 11 years of Greek defiance through the relentless refinement of siege techniques. The ceremonies invoke divine approval for conquests, achieved through methodical application of superior resources rather than heroic individual combat. Sacred fires consume offerings, brought by subjects whose prosperity depends upon security that only successful military campaigns provide. Milesians' surrender follows immediately after religious ceremonies establish divine approval for conquest. The port's exhausted defenders open gates that resisted assault longer than any other Greek fortification. Captain Histiaeus presents his sword to Alyattes in courtyards where siege engines stand silent after achieving objectives requiring more patience than any previous campaign. The keys that change hands unlock treasuries filled with silver accumulated through maritime commerce, their contents financing further expansion while demonstrating how successful warfare creates resources enabling additional conquest. Citizens emerging from cellars discover that submission brings relief from starvation rather than expected slaughter. Within days of the treaties, trade caravans were back on the roads, their laden beasts moving goods across borders once closed by war and enmity. Merchants organizing these expeditions understand that diplomatic success creates commercial opportunities, while military victory provides security, enabling profitable exchange. Silver coins bearing images celebrating recent triumphs facilitate transactions across linguistic differences. Foreign ambassadors arrive from kingdoms throughout the Eastern Mediterranean, their credentials acknowledging achievements that transform regional military success into international diplomatic recognition. These envoys bring gifts demonstrating their sovereign's desire for peaceful relationships with powers whose expansion proceeds through negotiation as well as conquest. Treaties they negotiate establish precedents for international law, balancing independence against cooperation. Palace scribes work through nights documenting administrative reforms that transform military conquest into governmental efficiency. Their oil lamps flicker against walls where maps display territories requiring systematic organization. Revenue flowing from these efficient systems funds both monument construction and military preparation, enabling rulers to build for eternity while preparing for future campaigns. The Great Tomb rose at accelerating speed, intended as the final monument to an age that had carried a people from the edge of survival to the heights of supremacy. Workers shaping stones for eternal rest follow architectural plans, incorporating lessons learned from studying monuments throughout the known world. Yet even as masons prepare his final resting place, Alyattes plans campaigns testing whether territorial consolidation enables further expansion or represents natural limits for kingdoms built on foundations stronger than military success alone. While it commemorates what has already been won, the monument also invites future rulers to convert the legacy of strength into transformative change. In Lydia's valleys, where electrum streams carry nature's wealth toward the sea, accumulated prosperity and diplomatic alliances provide resources for ventures that will reshape how the ancient world measures value itself. Heated arguments fill the palace courtyard, where merchants wave irregular lumps of precious metal, their voices rising in disputes that threaten to disrupt the kingdom's expanding commerce. Master Artemon spreads these river treasures across bronze scales that register weights with precision, learned through decades of trade, his calculations revealing inconsistencies that frustrate merchants who must evaluate each piece separately. The irregular shapes and varying purities that make electrum valuable also make it unreliable for the complex transactions that enable kingdoms to function efficiently. Behind the workshops where these experiments unfold, construction continues on Alyattes' massive tomb. The king himself descends from the monument site to observe craftsmen whose innovations might revolutionize commerce throughout the ancient world. His presence transforms routine metallurgical investigation into royal policy, lending authority to experiments that lesser rulers might dismiss as unnecessary complications. Within the palace yard, merchants debated the worth of silver, copper, and electrum as their exchanges charted the destiny of the kingdom's trade. Trader Pythes displays goods from across the Mediterranean: Egyptian papyrus, Phoenician purple dye, Greek olive oil, while explaining how irregular weights and uncertain purities complicate negotiations that should focus on quality rather than measurement disputes. His scarred hands gesture towards scales that must weigh each piece of precious metals separately, calculations consuming time that reduces profit margins. The problems he describes reflect challenges that affect every aspect of international commerce. Foreign dealers demand exact measurements before accepting Lydian electrum, their distrust based on experience with irregular qualities that make some transactions profitable, while others result in losses. This uncertainty discourages long-distance trade precisely when the kingdom's expansion requires reliable commercial relationships. At the temple, officials gauged the material signs of devotion, bronze scales tipping under offerings that stretched from minute flakes to generous nuggets. Chief priest Gyges notes disparities that complicate religious accounting. Two pieces of identical weight might possess different values due to varying gold content, creating inequities that trouble faithful souls seeking divine favor through generous gifts. His records document contributions that appear equal yet carry different worth, problems that reflect broader difficulties affecting all economic activity. Inconsistencies uncovered during these holy weighings mirror the frustrations of secular commerce. Worshippers who contribute electrum of similar size but different purity receive unequal recognition for their offerings, creating resentment that undermines religious unity. The priest's careful documentation proves that standardization serves spiritual as well as material purposes. Electrum nuggets tumble from leather pouches as royal assayers test each piece for purity, using techniques that heat metal until its true composition becomes visible. Master Candaules applies touchstone methods learned from Egyptian goldsmiths. His experienced eye reading color changes that reveal how much gold each sample contains. The variations he discovers range from pieces that barely qualify as precious metal to others whose purity rivals refined bullion, yet all carry equal acceptance in current markets. His testing reveals the fundamental problem. Nature provides electrum in countless varieties, yet commerce requires standard values that enable rapid exchange. The solution demands human intervention to impose consistency, where geological processes create infinite variation. The noise of hammering filled the palace workshops as smiths fashioned electrum into uniform weights, bronze tools crafting precision to replace uncertainty in commerce. The royal mint that emerges from these experiments occupies chambers adjacent to the treasury, its furnaces burning charcoal that fills corridors with smoke and promise of revolutionary change. Dies carved with images of roaring lions await testing on metal, heated to temperatures that make shaping possible. Young Prince Croesus observes these innovations with eyes that see possibilities extending far beyond current applications. His questions probe deeper implications of standardized currency, how guaranteed weights might facilitate long-distance trade, how royal images could carry political messages, how consistent values might enable complex financial arrangements impossible with irregular precious metals. Along the Hermus, stream workers sifted through gravel left by the floods, separating electrum from common stones, their steady efforts supplying the trial mints with precious material. The seasonal rhythms that govern their work match agricultural cycles. Highest yields coming after spring floods carry fresh deposits from Mount Timolus toward collection points where royal agents supervise recovery operations. These laborers understand their role in processes that transform random geological gifts into instruments of royal policy. Their techniques for separating precious metal from worthless debris require skills passed through generations of river workers. Wooden pans swirled with practiced motions concentrate heavy electrum, while lighter materials wash away, each day's labor yielding modest quantities of metal whose value will multiply through royal innovations. Foreign traders examine the first experimental coins with skepticism mixed with growing excitement, their experienced fingers testing edges that bear consistent thickness, while their eyes study lions stamped with remarkable clarity. Egyptian merchant Khemwaset compares these innovations to silver rings that serve similar purposes in Nile commerce, yet acknowledges superior convenience of pieces whose values require no additional verification. His calculations reveal advantages that could transform international exchange. The The standardization that these early coins represent addresses problems that have frustrated honest dealers throughout the ancient world. No longer must every transaction begin with weighing and testing precious metals. Royal stamps guarantee both weight and purity, enabling rapid exchange that encourages commerce while reducing opportunities for fraud. In the minting halls, supervisors refined processes that boosted output while preserving standards, transforming workshops into arenas where metallurgy served power. The dies they carve must withstand repeated striking, while producing images clear enough to prevent counterfeiting. Bronze hammers shaped specifically for coin production create percussion that rings with mechanical precision, each blow transferring royal authority to metal that will carry political messages throughout the known world. These innovations require craftsmen who understand both artistic requirements and practical limitations. Lions stamped on coin faces must remain recognizable after years of handling, while metal must retain its shape despite stresses that would deform inferior alloys. Temple treasuries begin accumulating the new currency as worshippers discover advantages of donations whose values require no verification, their standardized offerings enabling more efficient religious accounting. Priest Gyges notes how quickly congregations adapt to innovations that simplify sacred transactions while ensuring fair recognition for all contributions. The electrum pieces that fill sacred coffers bear images that proclaim royal authority while serving divine purposes. By witnessing temples employ standardized currency for offerings, merchants saw religious approval turn practical convenience into secular legitimacy. The same advantages that serve sacred accounting apply equally to commercial transactions, creating momentum for widespread adoption of innovations that benefit all participants in economic activity. Market days in Sardis witness growing acceptance of royal currency as traders discover practical advantages outweighing traditional preferences for tested metals. Booth operators, who previously required scales and testing implements, now complete transactions with simple counting. Their increased efficiency enabling higher volumes while reducing disputes. The coins that change hands carry images of royal lions while facilitating exchange that strengthens both individual prosperity and collective economic growth. The rise of new monetary practices forced commerce laws to expand, covering production, distribution, and recognition of currency. Royal magistrates who adjudicate trade disputes develop precedents that protect honest dealers, while establishing penalties for counterfeiting that threatens monetary integrity. The legal frameworks they create provide foundations for currency systems that will influence commercial practice throughout the ancient world. In agricultural exchanges, coins of fixed value proved especially popular, freeing farmers from the burden of testing the worth of silver or gold. Rural producers who bring grain and livestock to urban markets discover that fixed denominations simplify transactions while ensuring fair compensation for their products. Lydian coinage first gained international standing when foreign merchants introduced it to new markets, its reliability assured by uniform quality and royal authority. These pieces serve as ambassadors for the kingdom's commercial integrity, their wide acceptance demonstrating how innovative policies create influence extending beyond territorial boundaries. Trade networks that adopt Lydian currency standards facilitate exchange while spreading political influence through economic relationships. Records preserved from the period reveal how standardized coinage transformed regional trade by removing inefficiencies that once stunted growth. Scribes who maintain these accounts observe increased trade volumes, reduced transaction disputes, and growing international recognition of Lydian monetary innovations. The golden streams that flow from Tmolus continue carrying nature's gifts toward workshops where human ingenuity transforms random geological abundance into instruments of political and economic power. In Lydia's valleys, where innovation meets opportunity, where royal vision combines with accumulated prosperity, the foundations of monetary revolution solidify like cooled metal shaped by patient hammers into forms that will endure long after their creators return to dust. Prince Attis sharpens his hunting spear in palace courtyards, where autumn's sunlight filters through olive branches heavy with ripening fruit, his young hands working the bronze point to killing sharpness, while dreams of triumphant return dance in eyes bright with anticipation. The heir to Lydian wealth has reached an age where royal duties must be balanced against youthful desires for adventure, his father's protective restrictions chafing against natural impulses that demand expression through deeds worthy of future songs. Around him, courtiers prepare for the expedition that will test both his courage and his fate against quarry that roams the sacred forests of Mount Tmolus. His father watches these preparations with unease that grows stronger each day, memories of ominous dreams haunting sleep that should refresh rulers, burdened with governing the richest kingdom in the known world. Croesus has consulted every oracle from Delphi to Dodona, regarding visions that show his beloved son pierced by iron, their cryptic responses providing no comfort despite offerings that would ransom cities. The golden treasures he has sacrificed to divine wisdom weigh nothing against parental fear that watches every servant polish weapons for the hunt. Adrastus arrives at the palace gates bearing credentials written in his own tears, the Phrygian exile whose accidentally spilled kinsman's life has driven him from homeland toward whatever sanctuary foreign mercy might provide. His travel-stained robes speak of journeys across dangerous territories, where bandits prey upon lone travelers, while his eyes carry the haunted look of men who have learned that good intentions cannot protect against tragic consequences. King Croesus receives this supplicant with the generous hospitality that has made his court a refuge for unfortunates seeking fresh starts in lives disrupted by circumstance. The exile's story unfolds in private chambers, where oil lamps flicker against walls decorated with hunting scenes that now seem prophetic of disasters yet to come. His confession of accidental homicide during a family dispute reveals character that abhors violence, yet seems cursed to encounter it wherever he travels. Croesus grants not merely sanctuary, but adoption into royal service, his compassion transforming stranger into trusted advisor, whose gratitude creates bonds that substitute for the blood relationships that fate has severed. Servants prepare hunting equipment in armories, where bronze spear points receive final sharpening, while leather gear undergoes inspection that ensures no detail escapes royal attention. The king insists upon personally examining every weapon that will accompany his son, removing iron implements while retaining only bronze tools, whose softer metal cannot fulfill the oracular warnings that haunt his dreams. His precautions extend to armor selection, choosing pieces that provide protection without incorporating the deadly metal that prophecy identifies as the instrument of approaching tragedy. Activity hummed in the palace workshops as supplies were readied for hunts that served as both recreation and diplomacy, justifying their grandeur and cost. Foreign ambassadors who observe these preparations marvel at wealth that enables such magnificent displays, their reports carrying news of Lydian prosperity to distant courts, where rulers measure their own achievements against standards that seem increasingly modest by comparison. The abundance that surrounds every aspect of court life demonstrates power that rests on foundations deeper than military conquest alone. Attis leads his mounted companions through gates that open onto roads connecting the capital to hunting preserves where game thrives under royal protection. his excitement infectious among young nobles whose lives have known only peace and prosperity. The prince's laughter rings across courtyards, where his father stands watching with eyes that see doom approaching, despite all precautions taken to prevent fulfillment of prophecies that seem determined to accomplish their terrible purposes. Behind them, Adrastus follows with gratitude that will soon transform into guilt beyond human endurance. In the stillness of the high forests, the royal hunting party advanced, the quiet broken only by hooves striking the earth and bronze gear ringing along paths ancient to the boar. Ancient trees whose branches have sheltered countless generations of both predators and prey cast shadows across trails that wind toward clearings, where fate waits patient as stone for mortals who believe they can outwit divine will through careful preparation. The spears that catch sunlight filtering through autumn leaves seem too bright, too eager, too ready for the tragedy they will soon enable. Strong hounds lunged at their bonds as handlers scoured the ground for tracks, the animals already alert to scents suggesting prey, grand enough for royal sport. The pack that accompanies this expedition includes hounds bred for generations to serve palace hunts, their bloodlines as carefully maintained as those of the nobles who ride behind them. Their excited whining creates music that drowns out the silence that should warn of approaching disaster. Beaters advance through undergrowth, where massive shapes move like shadows given substance, their calls echoing off rocky slopes as they drive dangerous game toward clearing, where princes wait with weapons ready. The wild boar that emerges from these ancient woods carries tusks capable of ripping through bronze armor, its small eyes burning with rage that transforms peaceful forest creature into engine of destruction. Atys raises his spear with confidence, born of years of successful hunts, unaware that this quarry serves purposes beyond mere sport. The beast charges straight toward the prince, whose bronze point awaits its approach. Yet Adrastus sees opportunity to demonstrate gratitude through service that might redeem past failures. His own spear flies toward the rushing animal, with accuracy that should save his benefactor's son. Yet fate guides the weapon toward targets that prophecy has already selected. The bronze pierces royal flesh instead of bristling hide, fulfilling oracles through the very loyalty that sought to prevent their accomplishment. Atys falls among fallen leaves while his life flows away through wounds that mock all precautions taken against iron, proving that bronze proves equally deadly when fate determines the outcome. The prince's dying gaze finds his father's face in the crowd of hunters who rush toward him, his lips forming words of farewell that cut deeper than any weapon into hearts that must witness love destroyed by accident, masquerading as kindness. Around his cooling body, nobles who came seeking sport discover grief that will haunt their remaining days. King Croesus cradles his son's body, while Adrastus throws himself upon the nearest sword, the exile's suicide adding fresh tragedy to scenes already drenched in royal sorrow. The Phrygian's final act demonstrates guilt that cannot survive confrontation with consequences that exceed all possible redemption, his death providing no comfort to the father, whose generosity enabled the very tragedy it sought to prevent. Two corpses lie in forest clearings, where hunting expedition becomes funeral procession that carries shattered dreams back toward a palace that will never again know joy. Solon of Athens arrives during these days of royal mourning, the wise lawgiver whose reputation for sage counsel has drawn him to Lydian courts, where wealth and wisdom meet in conversations that explore the relationship between material prosperity and human happiness. His observations of royal grief, despite unlimited resources, provide foundations for philosophy that questions whether any mortal should be called fortunate before death, reveals the final accounting of life's gains and losses. The Athenian's words fall upon ears made wise by suffering, yet their truth proves too bitter for immediate acceptance. Guards escort foreign dignitaries through palace halls, where wealth beyond imagination surrounds chambers, echoing with lamentations that no amount of gold can silence. These visitors observe riches that would purchase kingdoms, rooms filled with precious metals, walls decorated with ivory and amber, fountains flowing with perfumed water, while hearing sounds that prove money cannot buy the only possessions that matter when tragedy strikes royal families. Their reports carry news of Lydian prosperity, mixed with accounts of royal vulnerability that reveals common humanity beneath golden crowns. Years pass like seasons in a cycle that gradually transforms acute grief into chronic melancholy, the king's mourning settling into permanent shadow that influences every policy decision. Croesus continues governing with competence that serves subjects who benefit from rule by someone who understands loss, his administrative wisdom shaped by experiences that teach the temporary nature of all earthly achievements. The prosperity that accumulates during these careful years creates resources for ventures that will test whether accumulated strength enables expansion or represents the natural limits of sustainable growth. Treasury officials document wealth that exceeds the combined holdings of neighboring kingdoms, their careful records revealing accumulation that enables projects requiring resources beyond anything contemporary rulers can imagine. The silver and gold that fill royal vaults represent successful governance that transforms commercial innovation into political advantage, while tribute from subject territories demonstrates acceptance that rests on benefits provided rather than force applied. Yet beneath this material success lies emotional emptiness that makes every achievement hollow compared to the irreplaceable loss that can never be restored. Returning to the oracle, the king sought divine direction on whether his rule would stand as mere stewardship of wealth or as a quest for greatness that might justify the hardships borne by his house. The sacred vapors rising from Delphic chasms carry questions about Eastern expansion, their mysterious answers providing encouragement disguised as warnings that ambitious rulers interpret according to desires rather than divine intentions. The responses he receives speak of destroying great empires when certain rivers are crossed, prophecies that seem to promise triumph while concealing disaster. Persian messengers bring reports of Cyrus consolidating authority over territories that stretch from sunrise toward regions where Lydian influence has never penetrated, their intelligence describing military innovations and administrative reforms that create challenges requiring responses beyond anything previous generations faced. The empire that emerges from these eastern lands represents threats and opportunities in equal measure, its rapid expansion demanding either accommodation or confrontation that will test whether Lydia's accumulated advantages prove sufficient against enemies whose own strengths remain largely unknown. Within the palace, advisors assembled to consider intelligence of Persian power, expanding beyond tolerable limits, their arguments balancing sober restraint with the lure of bold achievement. The advisors who participate in these discussions understand that their king's grief has not diminished his capabilities, yet they recognize that emotional wounds might influence decisions requiring clarity unclouded by personal loss. The choices that emerge from these meetings will determine whether the kingdom built on golden streams can adapt to challenges that threaten everything generations of careful building have accomplished. Cyrus rides across steppes where his cavalry raises dust clouds visible from distant mountains, the Persian kings advance, marking the eastern horizon like an approaching storm. His mounted archers follow routes that carry conquest toward kingdoms that have never faced enemies, whose tactics blend nomad mobility with imperial organization. The horses beneath these warriors carry riders trained from childhood to shoot accurately while moving at full gallop, their composite bows sending arrows farther than any weapon the Western world has seen. Arriving in Sardis, envoys from Persia presented demands recorded in scripts from across the empire, their letters framing surrender as the path to harmony. These envoys wear silk robes that demonstrate Eastern prosperity, while their eyes carry the confidence of men who serve a master whose armies have never known defeat. The letters they present speak of protection offered to rulers wise enough to acknowledge Persian supremacy without forcing military demonstrations of superior strength. King Croesus reads these documents in chambers where maps display his kingdom's boundaries, the parchment crackling in hands that have signed treaties yet never surrendered sovereignty to foreign powers. His advisors gather around the royal throne while scribes translate terms that demand tribute, hostages, and military cooperation in campaigns against neighboring kingdoms. The silence that follows these readings weighs heavier than the golden ornaments that decorate palace walls. Seeking divine direction, the king multiplied his visits to the oracle, uncertain if the kingdom's future lay in autonomy or subordination. The sacred vapors rising from temple braziers carry questions about military resistance, their mysterious responses providing encouragement that ambitious rulers interpret according to desires rather than warnings. Priests who deliver these pronouncements speak of great empires falling when rivers are crossed, prophecies that seem to promise victory while concealing disaster. The Delphic response arrives written on papyrus that bears seals from the most sacred shrine in the Greek world, its cryptic language offering hope to rulers seeking divine approval for military ventures. The oracle speaks of destroying mighty empires through bold action, words that kindle confidence in hearts already burning, with determination to resist foreign domination. Yet the priestess provides no clarification regarding which empire will fall or which rivers bring destruction to those who cross them. Croesus summons his military commanders to councils where bronze weapons gleam in lamplight that illuminates faces marked by uncertainty about confronting enemies whose fighting methods remain largely unknown. The generals who advise their sovereign understand cavalry warfare through conflicts with Cimmerian raiders, yet they recognize that Persian military organization represents challenges requiring responses beyond anything previous experience provides. Their deliberations balance confidence in superior wealth against concerns about tactical innovations that might neutralize traditional advantages. In the treasury, officials assessed reserves meant for war, asking whether their amassed fortune could stand against enemies whose wealth was drawn from uncharted dominions. The gold and silver that fill royal vaults represent generations of careful governance and successful commerce. Yet war consumes such riches faster than taxation can replace them. Scribes who maintain these accounts work through nights estimating costs for military adventures whose outcomes remain subject to divine will. Within the palace grounds, soldiers sharpened their arms, the whetstones bearing the marks of generations of martial preparation. These warriors carry spears forged from metals purchased with standardized currency, their equipment representing technological advantages that smaller forces might use to defeat larger armies, equipped with inferior implements. Gold from Lydia attracted foreign warriors to the capital, where a mix of weapons and armor displayed the wide range of Mediterranean traditions they represented. Greek hoplites march beside Carian slingers, while Thracian cavalry practice maneuvers designed for rapid deployment against enemies who might approach from unexpected directions. These professional soldiers bring experience, yet none have faced Persian armies, whose reputation grows with each successful campaign. The king reviews these forces from palace balconies, where silk banners flutter in winds that carry dust from drilling grounds. His satisfaction in observing well-equipped troops mingles with anxiety about confronting enemies whose capabilities remain largely mysterious despite intelligence gathered through diplomatic contacts. The army that assembles under his command represents the finest fighting force Lydian resources can purchase. Yet quantity and quality may prove insufficient against innovations that have enabled Persian expansion across vast territories. Reconnaissance reports arrive describing Persian advance guards approaching the eastern frontier, where boundary stones mark limits that have remained unchanged since the solar eclipse validated territorial agreements. These scouts describe cavalry formations larger than any previously witnessed in Western regions, their movements coordinated through signal systems that enable rapid deployment across battlefields, whose dimensions exceed traditional tactical planning. The intelligence they gather suggests approaching conflicts will test every assumption about warfare that has guided military thinking throughout the region. Efforts at diplomacy brought only modest results, with nearby realms balancing the urgency of survival against the doubtful rewards of joining an anti-Persian alliance. The ambassadors who carry these proposals discover that fear of Persian retaliation outweighs loyalty to traditional alliances, their missions revealing how quickly regional politics adapt to changing power balances. Some rulers offer moral support while avoiding military commitments that might draw unwanted attention from conquerors who prefer submission to destruction. Croesus crosses the Hellenes at the head of armies that represent the largest military force any Lydian ruler has ever commanded, their bronze armor catching sunlight as they advance toward confrontations that will determine the kingdom's future. The river crossing unfolds with ceremonial solemnity as priests offer sacrifices for divine favor, while engineers construct bridges capable of supporting cavalry and siege equipment. Behind them, supply trains carry provisions for campaigns whose duration depends upon outcomes that only gods can foresee. Persian cavalry appears on eastern horizons, like storm clouds gathering for tempests that will test whether Lydian military preparations prove adequate against enemies whose tactics remain largely unknown. The dust clouds that mark their approach grow larger each day, while scouts report formations that exceed anything contemporary. Military thinking considers manageable. These eastern warriors ride horses bred for endurance rather than speed, their composite bows enabling accurate shooting at ranges that make traditional defensive formations obsolete. The armies meet at Teria, where autumn winds carry the scent of approaching winter, across battlefields that will soon know the clash of bronze against iron. Neither force achieves decisive advantage during initial encounters that test strength and resolve, without revealing tactical innovations that might determine final outcomes. Both commanders withdraw after inconclusive fighting that demonstrates mutual respect while preserving forces for larger confrontations that await more favorable circumstances. Winter quarters provide opportunities for both armies to rest and re-equip, while their leaders plan campaigns that will resume when seasonal conditions permit effective military operations. Both rulers understand that the coming year will witness battles that reshape regional politics according to whoever proves stronger when diplomacy yields to warfare. The Eastern ruler's decision to maintain large forces through winter demonstrates strategic thinking that prioritizes long-term objectives over immediate tactical considerations. His preparations suggest that Persian ambitions extend beyond mere territorial acquisition toward complete reorganization of regional power structures. Lydian intelligence gathering reveals Persian innovations in siege warfare that threaten fortifications previously considered impregnable against any assault. The reports that reach royal attention describe engineering techniques that enable rapid reduction of defended positions, their effectiveness demonstrated through conquests that have eliminated kingdoms whose military traditions seemed adequate for defensive purposes. These revelations force reconsideration of strategies that assumed superior fortifications would compensate for numerical disadvantages. Spring campaigns resume with both armies, testing innovations developed during winter preparations, their initial encounters revealing tactical developments that will influence the conduct of warfare throughout the ancient world. These battles serve as laboratories where theory meets practice under conditions that punish failure with death. The decisive encounter approaches as both rulers concentrate their full strength for confrontations that will determine whether Persian expansion continues westward or meets its first serious reverse. Intelligence reports suggest that Cyrus has committed resources that make retreat impossible, while Croesus has invested everything his kingdom possesses in military preparations that must succeed or witness the end of Lydian independence, battles that will establish which empire deserves to inherit the legacy of ancient powers, whose territories await new masters capable of governing them effectively, are now closer than ever. The ambassador from Babylon arrives at Sardis bearing gifts that would bankrupt smaller kingdoms. Ivory boxes filled with incense worth more than villages, silk robes that shimmer like water under moonlight, and clay tablets proposing mutual defense against the storm gathering in the east. King Croesus receives these offerings in his throne room, where maps carved into marble floors display territories that Persian power claims with each passing season, spreading like spilled wine across parchment. The Babylonian envoy, a eunuch named Belshazzar, who speaks 7 languages with equal fluency, unfolds his proposal with the careful precision of someone who understands that words poorly chosen might determine whether civilizations survive or vanish into dust. Egyptian warships crowd the harbor at Phocaea, while their delegation ascends mountain roads toward the Lydian capital. Bronze armor polished to mirror brightness, proposals written on papyrus bearing the seal of Pharaoh Amasis himself. These men of the Nile have watched Cyrus transform from vassal prince to emperor, whose mounted archers scatter armies like leaves before autumn winds. The treaty they carry includes provisions for naval support, their vessels ready to blockade Persian access to Mediterranean ports should the Eastern Empire attempt to project power across waters they have never sailed. In palace archives, scribes work through nights documenting negotiations, whose complexity would challenge future diplomats, their reed pens scratching across surfaces that preserve agreements balancing immediate military needs against long-term political considerations. The Babylonians want guarantees that Lydian gold will fund defensive fortifications along the Tigris. The Egyptians demand assurances that any peace negotiations will include restoration of their traditional sphere of influence in Syria. Beneath these careful words lies understanding that none dare speak, the terror of what Cyrus represents. Sandanis departs through palace gates on roads leading east, the most trusted advisor to serve 3 Lydian kings, now carrying sealed letters toward the Persian court at Ecbatana. His mission extends beyond mere diplomacy toward observation of an enemy whose methods remain mysterious despite intelligence gathered through conventional channels. What he discovers in those eastern palaces will return to haunt Lydian dreams. Administrative efficiency that makes Greek democracy appear chaotic and Egyptian bureaucracy seem primitive. Decisions requiring months of council debate in Sardis resolve in single audiences with a king who listens to all advice, yet makes choices with the swift certainty of a sword stroke. The Spartan ambassador stands before Croesus with typical Laconian brevity, his scarred hands empty of gifts, yet carrying promises worth more than gold. "We will send soldiers," he states, 5 words that carry more weight than all the Babylonian treaties combined. Yet even Spartan bronze spears, those weapons that have never known defeat in pitched battle, seem fragile when intelligence reports describe Persian armies moving like water across landscapes, their cavalry covering distances that Greek hoplites could not march in 3 times the time. At the border stations, Eastern traders appeared with their wares, accepting Lydian coinage, the innovation of Croesus's father, just as freely as they took darricks. Border commanders report not invasion, but commerce, as if Cyrus demonstrates that absorption can proceed through either peaceful exchange or violent conquest, but will proceed regardless. The Eastern Empire expands not through destruction, but through integration. Alongside the empire's officers stood Median nobles, and subject peoples were allowed their own gods, languages, and laws, as long as they accepted overlordship and paid dues. In the royal treasury, Croesus counts wealth sufficient to hire every mercenary from Sicily to the Black Sea, yet gold cannot purchase what he needs most: time. The Persian Empire expands at roughly 300 miles per year, mathematics that suggest arrival at Aegean shores within a decade whether Lydia resists or not. The question transforms from whether to fight into when, and every potential ally understands this inevitability even as they hesitate to commit resources to what might prove a losing cause. The Babylonian ambassador extends his stay, claiming illness while actually waiting to observe which direction events will flow. His king, Nabonidus, excavates ancient temples with more enthusiasm than he prepares for war. Egyptian promises grow vaguer with each passing week. Even Spartans, those paragons of military commitment, send word that their forces might face delays due to religious obligations. The coalition Croesus seeks to build reveals cracks before its foundation sets. Envoys depart for every major oracle in the known world, carrying sealed questions with instructions to open them on the same day, and record whatever prophecies they receive. This systematic attempt to verify divine guidance through multiple sources yields responses that vary wildly, except for one consistent theme appearing in message after message. Something about crossing rivers and destroying empires. The ambiguity that should warn instead encourages, as royal interpretation bends toward desired meaning rather than careful analysis. The war council assembles in chambers where lamplight flickers against walls decorated with images of past victories. Men whose families have served Lydia for generations, offering advice shaped by experience of smaller wars against familiar enemies. Not one has faced an opponent like Cyrus. Not one has commanded armies against forces that treat warfare as science rather than art. Their bronze weapons and traditional tactics carry the weight of successful tradition, yet seem suddenly antique when measured against reports of Persian innovations. Lydian cavalry officers study intelligence describing Persian mounted archers who shoot accurately while riding at full gallop, their composite bows sending arrows farther than any Western weapon can match. Engineers examine reports of siege techniques that reduced fortresses considered impregnable, their effectiveness demonstrated through conquests that eliminated kingdoms whose military traditions seemed adequate for defensive purposes. Each piece of information adds weight to scales already tipping toward conclusions that diplomatic efforts seek to avoid. Through palace windows, Croesus observes the Pactolus River, carrying its burden of golden sand toward the sea, the same waters that provided wealth enabling his kingdom's rise, now reflecting sunset light like blood. The coins that revolutionized commerce, the gold that built the mightiest treasury in the ancient world, the innovations that made Lydia the economic center of the Mediterranean, all await testing against an enemy who measures success not in wealth accumulated, but in territories absorbed, not in gold possessed, but in peoples governed. Sandanis returns from his eastern mission, bearing observations that confirm worst fears while revealing unexpected opportunities. The Persian system incorporates rather than destroys, maintains rather than demolishes, preserves local traditions while establishing overarching authority. Yet this very flexibility might provide avenues for negotiation, possibilities for arrangement that preserve Lydian identity within Persian structure. The advisor's report generates heated debate between those who see accommodation as wisdom and those who view it as betrayal of everything previous generations built. The season turns toward winter as final preparations begin for campaigns that will determine whether Lydian independence survives or joins the growing list of formerly sovereign nations now serving Persian ambitions. In armories, smiths forge weapons, while knowing that superior metallurgy might matter less than superior tactics. In treasuries, officials count resources, while understanding that all the gold in the world cannot purchase victory against an enemy who has never known defeat. In temples, priests offer sacrifices while interpreting omens that seem to promise triumph through actions that might instead guarantee disaster. The wheel of fortune that lifted Lydia from regional power to international prominence continues its revolution, though those who ride its heights cannot perceive the descent that approaches with mechanical certainty. The same forces that enabled rise, geographical advantage, natural resources, technological innovation, now attract the attention of powers whose own advantages render previous strengths obsolete. Croesus stands at the pinnacle of success, while the ground beneath shifts toward configurations that will redefine what success means in an age where empires expand through efficiency rather than mere conquest. Autumn frost glitters beneath the horses as the host fords the Halles, leaving behind the frontier that had guaranteed peace since the eclipse united rival thrones in truce. Croesus rides at the column's head, his golden armor catching morning light, while behind him stretch 60,000 men whose bronze weapons gleam like a second sunrise. The oracle's words echo in his mind, cross the river, and destroy a great empire, their promise of victory drowning out the warnings that counselors whispered in palace chambers. The water that parts around their crossing runs cold and dark, carrying fallen leaves toward the sea like omens that none pause to read. At Pteria, the armies meet as the first snows begin to fall, white flakes settling on bronze shields and iron spear points alike. The Persian forces arrive with discipline that transforms individual warriors into a single organism, responding to Cyrus's will. Their movements coordinated through horn signals that carry across battlefields wider than any Greek engagement has known. Neither side achieves clear advantage as day turns to dusk, the frozen ground between them carpeted with bodies whose blood steams in winter air. Croesus sees his mercenaries braced tight, their formation unshaken as horsemen crash upon their spears, though the victory feels empty, for from the horizon surge new waves without number. The Lydian king orders withdrawal to Sardis as winter deepens, dismissing his mercenary forces to save the gold their maintenance requires through months when no army can effectively campaign. His generals assure him that Cyrus will follow ancient custom and retire to winter quarters, that spring will bring allied reinforcements from Egypt and Sparta, that time works in favor of defenders who control the wealthiest city in the world. Toward the waiting harbors, the discharged men go, contracts honored, pockets filled with coins marked by the lion emblem of the realm. But Cyrus follows immediately, driving his forces through winter storms that would halt conventional armies. his cavalry covering ground with speed that makes mockery of seasonal limitations. The Persian king understands what his Lydian counterpart has forgotten, that rules of warfare exist to be broken by those bold enough to seize opportunities when enemies expect pause. His mounted soldiers subsist on dried meat and mare's milk, their endurance trained through childhood spent on steppes where winter meant movement or death. The supply trains that follow carry equipment for siege warfare, engines constructed according to designs perfected during the reduction of Median fortresses. Sardis awakens to find Persian forces emerging from morning mist, like phantoms given substance, their encirclement of the city complete before defenders can summon dismissed mercenaries who are already sailing toward distant homes. The Acropolis that has never fallen to assault rises above streets where citizens scramble to defensive positions, their confidence in impregnable fortifications wavering as they count enemy numbers that exceed anything their walls were designed to withstand. Croesus sends desperate riders toward allies who promise support, though he knows that winter storms will delay any response beyond the city's ability to endure siege. The initial Persian assault employs a tactic that transforms Lydian strength into weakness. Cyrus orders his baggage camels to the front lines, their unfamiliar scent causing Lydian cavalry horses to panic and throw their riders. The war horses that have carried Lydian nobles to victory in countless battles now rear and flee from creatures they have never encountered, their terror spreading through ranks where discipline dissolves into chaos. Arrows fall like winter rain upon defenders, whose cavalry edge has melted away with the morning dew, while siege engines grind forward over fields the frightened horses have deserted. For 14 days the walls hold, while within the city, granaries empty and wells run low. The citizens who cheered their army's departure now huddle in temples where priests offer prayers that seem to dissipate like smoke in winter wind. Children cry for bread while their parents count remaining supplies and calculate how many days remain before hunger accomplishes what Persian weapons cannot. On palace walls, defenders pour boiling oil on attackers who raise scaling ladders. Yet each assault probes weaknesses that multiply, as exhaustion claims those who cannot rest while enemies press forward with fresh troops. A Lydian soldier named Heraclids drops his helmet over the wall, the bronze disc bouncing down the cliff face that protects the Acropolis's northern approach. Without thinking, he climbs down to retrieve it, his path following handholds that generations of defenders have used when walls required maintenance. Above, his companions mock his concern for a single piece of equipment, while below, a Persian scout named Oberes observes every movement, memorizing the route that transforms an impregnable fortress into an accessible target. That night, he guides the climbers along the same path, their soft leather boots gripping where bronze-shod feet would have slid. The Persians enter the city as dawn breaks, their sudden appearance within walls that should have held for months, creating panic that spreads faster than flame through summer dry timber. Defenders who maintained discipline through 2 weeks of assault now flee toward the Acropolis, where Croesus makes his final stand. The treasury doors hang open as soldiers pour inside to behold wealth beyond imagining. Golden vessels piled high, chambers stacked with silver bars, vaults brimming with coins hoarded across generations. Yet Cyrus has issued strict orders against looting until the city's fate is decided, his discipline transforming conquest from chaotic pillage into organized absorption. Croesus stands atop a wooden pyre constructed in the palace courtyard, the flames beginning to catch as Persian soldiers watch their enemy choose death over capture. The wood smoke rises towards skies where winter clouds gather like witnesses to the end of Lydian independence. As flames reach his robes, the defeated king cries out, "Solon, Solon, Solon," the name of the Athenian sage, who warned that no man should be called happy until death reveals the final accounting. Cyrus, curious about these last words, orders the fire extinguished and demands explanation from the king he has conquered. Through translators, Croesus tells of Solon's visit years before, how the wise Greek refused to call him the happiest man alive despite wealth that exceeded all contemporary measure. He speaks of learning that fortune operates in cycles, that those who ride highest fall furthest, that wisdom comes too late to those who mistake temporary advantage for permanent superiority. Cyrus listens with attention that transforms from curiosity to recognition, understanding that the man before him offers lessons that victory might otherwise obscure. The Persian king helps Croesus down from the pyre with his own hands, ordering physicians to tend burns that will heal while memories of flame remain forever. In the great hall where Lydian kings held court for generations, Cyrus installs himself with minimal ceremony, his actions demonstrating that conquest requires administration as much as military victory. He appoints Croesus as advisor, valuing the defeated king's knowledge of Western peoples and established trade networks. The Lydian coinage system endures under new rule, its mints that once struck revolutionary currency now issuing coins marked with foreign symbols beside the old familiar designs. The shift from kingdom to satrapy unfolds with a smoothness that spares trade and daily life from turmoil. The oracle's prophecy stands fulfilled in ways that Croesus never imagined. He has indeed destroyed a great empire, his own. The river he crossed with such confidence became the boundary of his ambition rather than the beginning of expansion. Yet in defeat, he discovers a different kind of wisdom, serving his conqueror with loyalty that springs from understanding rather than mere submission. The gold that once made him the richest king in the world now flows into Persian treasuries, yet the innovation of standardized currency that his kingdom pioneered continues spreading throughout an empire vaster than any previous ruler imagined. The satrap's palace in Sardis rises from the ashes of Croesus's throne room, its pillars carved with Persian winged bulls that gaze down upon courtiers who once served Lydian kings. Atyads, appointed to govern the conquered province, weighs gold in the same chambers where coins were first struck, though now the metal flows eastward to Persepolis rather than into local treasuries. The aristocrats who gather in his audience hall wear Persian trousers beneath their traditional robes, their appearance reflecting the cultural blending that transforms conquered peoples into imperial citizens. Yet beneath this surface accommodation, resentment simmers like water heated over coals, waiting for the moment when it will boil over into violence. Aristagoras arrives from Miletus in the spring of 499 before Christ, his ship carrying more than the usual trade goods. Hidden beneath amphorae of olive oil lie bronze weapons and promises of Greek support for rebellion. The tyrant-turned-revolutionary speaks in house courtyards, where Lydian nobles remember independence, his words igniting hopes that have smouldered through 2 generations of foreign rule. The coins that finance this conspiracy bear the old lion stamps alongside Persian archers, their dual imagery reflecting divided loyalties that will soon tear the region apart. In workshops where smiths once forged ceremonial armor, craftsmen now shape spear points in secret, their hammering masked by legitimate commercial production. The signal for revolt spreads from the harbor to the Acropolis faster than mounted messengers could carry it, smoke rising from the temple of Cybele, where priests have maintained sacred fires since before memory. Persian administrators flee toward the citadel as citizens pour into streets with weapons hidden for decades, their anger transforming from whispered complaints into roared demands for freedom. The satrap Artaphernes watches from palace walls as his city dissolves into chaos, calculating whether his garrison can hold until relief arrives from the east. Below, Lydians who have served imperial masters faithfully for 50 years join Greeks in tearing down symbols of foreign authority. Fire spreads through the lower city as wooden buildings catch sparks from the burning market, where tax records fuel revolutionary flames. The conflagration jumps from roof to roof, with hunger that consumes everything. Homes where families have lived for centuries. Workshops where the world's first coins were minted. Temples where gods both Lydian and Eastern received sacrifice. An old woman named Pythia carries water from the Pactolus in a futile attempt to save her house, the same structure where her grandmother hid gold when Cyrus conquered the city. The flames take it anyway, just as they take everything else below the stone walls of the Acropolis. Athenian hoplites march through the streets in bronze armor that reflects the fire's glow, their presence proving that this rebellion extends beyond local grievance to international conflict. These Greeks have sailed from Athens to support their Ionian kinsmen, bringing military expertise that transforms mob violence into organized assault. Yet even as they celebrate initial success, smoke carries warnings across the mountains to Persian forces that gather like storm clouds on the eastern horizon. The revolution that seems triumphant in its first days carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. The retreat begins before imperial reinforcements even appear, the rebels understanding that holding a burned city against retribution exceeds their capabilities. Ships crowd the harbor as revolutionaries flee toward islands where cavalry cannot follow, their departure leaving locals who join the revolt to face consequences alone. The citizens who hours before celebrated liberation now watch their supposed allies sail away, abandoning them to punishments that imperial law prescribes for rebellion. In palace dungeons, Artaphernes prepares lists of those who must die to restore order. Crucifixions line the royal road, from Sardis to Ephesus, timber crosses bearing rebels whose slow deaths serve as lessons for populations that might consider similar resistance. The executioners work with mechanical efficiency, their hammers driving nails through wrists while victims' families watch in enforced attendance. A young Lydian named Pythios, whose father joined the revolt's first day, memorizes faces of officers who supervise these killings, storing hatred that will pass through generations like inherited debt. The bodies remain on display until birds and weather reduce them to bones that finally receive burial in unmarked graves. Yet Lydian culture endures in valleys where the Pactolus still carries gold, in mountain villages where the ancestral language survives despite official use of Aramaic. Priests in hidden sanctuaries maintain rituals that blend Cybele with Anahita, creating syncretic religions that satisfy both Persian authorities and local traditions. The mystery cults that flourish in this environment promise salvation through divine secrets. Their ceremonies conducted in caves where initiates learn that political submission need not mean spiritual surrender. Young people take Eastern names for public use while keeping their ancestral names for family gatherings, where the old songs still echo. The mints of Sardis continue producing coins under imperial supervision, though now the gold flows primarily eastward to finance administrative projects. The standardized currency that Lydians invented serves the empire more effectively than tribute in kind, enabling efficient taxation across territories spanning from India to Egypt. Local merchants still profit from trade that passes through their rebuilt markets, adapting to Persian commercial law, while maintaining business practices developed over centuries. The coins that change hands carry images of Eastern kings, yet circulate through networks established when independence seemed eternal. In the reconstructed city, imperial architectural styles dominate public buildings, while private homes maintain traditional designs behind street facades that conform to administrative standards. The gymnasium, where young men train, serves both military requirements and Greek athletic traditions, its courtyard witnessing wrestling matches that follow Hellenic rules beneath statues of Ahura Mazda. The theatre carved into the hillside presents Greek tragedies with Eastern patronage, its audiences mixing languages and customs in ways that would have seemed impossible before conquest created forced intimacy between peoples. Children born after the revolt know only foreign rule, their education blending imperial curriculum with family traditions preserved through careful practice. They learn cuneiform alongside Greek letters, study Zoroastrian theology while participating in local mystery cults, speak Aramaic in public and their ancestral tongue at home. This generation represents synthesis rather than resistance, their identity encompassing both conquered heritage and imperial citizenship. The Athenian mint master Phanes holds a Lydian coin up to Mediterranean sunlight, its worn lion still visible after 60 years of circulation, studying the weight and purity that made Croesus wealthy beyond imagination. In the workshop below the Acropolis, his craftsmen prepare dies bearing Athena's owl, their design adapted from techniques that Lydian refugees taught previous generations when Sardis fell to Persian control. The silver from Laurian's mines flows through furnaces that transform raw ore into standardized drachmas, each one carrying the revolutionary concept that originated in Lydian valleys, guaranteed value backed by state authority. Across the Greek world, cities adopt their own symbols while maintaining the weight standards that make commerce possible between peoples who share no common language. Corinth stamps its coins with Pegasus, that winged horse reflecting maritime ambitions funded by currency that enables complex financial instruments. Aegena's sea turtles swim across Mediterranean markets, while Syracuse's dolphins leap through transactions that would have required lengthy negotiations before standardized money simplified exchange. Each polis adds its identity to the Lydian innovation, creating monetary diversity within systematic unity. The transformation extends beyond mere commerce into the structure of society itself. In Athens' Agora, citizens whose wealth previously consisted of land and livestock now carry fortunes in leather pouches, their social status measured in coins rather than cattle. The old aristocracy that traced power through ancestral estates watches merchants accumulate influence through successful trading ventures, their wealth liquid rather than fixed, mobile rather than rooted. Democracy itself becomes possible when citizens can be paid for jury duty and public service, their time compensated with silver that bears the owl of Athena. Mercenary captains count coins in temple treasuries, where cities hire professional soldiers for campaigns that amateur militias cannot sustain. A Spartan officer named Clearchus negotiates his company's rate, 10 drachmas per month for hoplites, 5 for light infantry, 20 for cavalry. The standardized payments enabling armies to campaign far from home without the complications of plunder-based compensation. These professional warriors fight with discipline, unknown to citizen soldiers who return to farms after battles, their loyalty purchased with regular wages that arrive in stamped metal rather than promises of future rewards. The Peloponnesian War's massive expenses demonstrate Coinage's dark power, both Athens and Sparta spending treasury reserves that took generations to accumulate. Athenian silver flows to purchase grain from Black Sea ports, while Spartan gold provided by Persia in history's irony, hires fleets that will destroy Athenian naval supremacy. The conflict that reshapes Greek politics becomes possible only because standardized currency enables sustained warfare beyond traditional seasonal campaigns. Cities mortgage future revenues to fund present victories, their debts calculated in talents that represent weights of silver rather than abstract obligations. In Delphi's sacred precincts, offerings accumulate in treasuries that resemble banks more than temples, their contents enabling loans that finance everything, from military expeditions to commercial ventures. The priests who manage these funds develop accounting methods that track interest payments and principal returns, their bronze tablets recording transactions that would seem familiar to modern financiers. The god Apollo becomes history's first institutional investor, his treasury providing capital that generates returns funding, oracle operations, and architectural projects. Philosophical discussions in Athens examine money's effect on human character. Socrates questioning whether wisdom can be purchased while merchants grow wealthy, selling things they don't understand. His student Plato watches coins change hands in the agora, contemplating ideal republics where philosopher kings might govern without currency's corrupting influence. Yet even as intellectuals debate money's moral implications, their discussions occur in spaces built with wages paid in silver, their leisure purchased by economic systems that coinage enables. The tomb of a merchant named Passion, discovered centuries later, contains coins from 30 different cities, testament to commerce that connected the Greek world through standardized value. His collection includes worn Lydian lions alongside fresh Athenian owls, Corinthian pegasi next to Syracusan dolphins, each piece representing relationships that transcended political boundaries. The coins tell stories of voyages from the Black Sea to Gibraltar, of goods exchanged and profits calculated, of a life made possible by innovations that began with hammered electrum in Sardis workshops. What began as crude invention grows more sophisticated, Greek minters realizing that heated dyes cut finer lines, and some metal blends withstand use better than others. The artistic quality that transforms functional currency into miniature sculptures reflects competitive pride between cities whose coins serve as ambassadors throughout the Mediterranean. A Syracusan die cutter named Kimon signs his work like a sculptor, his dolphins and nymphs achieving aesthetic heights that make his coins collectible art rather than mere money. Maritime insurance emerges from the need to protect valuable cargo, including currency shipments. Merchants paying premiums calculated as percentages of declared values. The contracts that formalize these arrangements, preserved on papyrus and bronze tablets, reveal sophisticated understanding of risk management made possible by standardized monetary values. Ships lost to storms or pirates trigger payments in silver drachmas, their crews' wages and cargo values precisely documented in monetary terms that all parties accept. By the 4th century BC, no significant transaction occurs without coined money, the innovation that began in Lydian streams having transformed every aspect of economic life. Construction workers receive daily wages in bronze obols. Soldiers collect silver drachmas monthly, while international merchants deal in gold status that cross political boundaries with ease. The revolution that Lydian metallurgists began reaches completion as even rural farmers abandon barter for monetary exchange, their surplus crops sold for coins that purchase manufactured goods from urban workshops. The spread continues beyond Greek territories as Celtic tribes adopt coinage after encountering Greek merchants, their crude imitations of Philip's gold staters carrying the concept northward into regions Lydians never imagined. Alexander reaches Sardis in 334 BC to find the gates standing open. The Persian garrison fled eastward like shadows before dawn. The young conqueror enters without drawing his sword. The fortress that resisted Cyrus for 14 days, surrendering to the Macedonian without a single arrow loosed. Citizens line streets with olive branches rather than weapons, their pragmatic acceptance reflecting wisdom earned through centuries of changing rulers. The treasurer Mithranes hands over keys to vaults still heavy with gold, his betrayal purchasing position under Macedonian administration. In the temple of Zeus, the same sanctuary where Lydian kings once honored Baal, Alexander offers sacrifice with theatrical precision. He climbs to the Acropolis, where Croesus made his last stand, surveying territories that now form stepping stones toward eastern ambitions. The young king appoints Ada, a Carian noblewoman claiming Lydian descent, as satrap, her selection demonstrating political wisdom that respects local sensibilities, while ensuring loyalty through gratitude rather than fear. For 8 years, Lydia enjoys relative autonomy under Macedonian rule, the satrapy functioning as supply base for campaigns that stretch to India. Sardis becomes a mint for Alexander's coins, the same workshops that created the world's first currency, now producing silver tetradrachms, bearing the conqueror's idealized portrait. These coins spread Hellenistic culture more effectively than armies, their circulation creating economic unity across territories that span 3 continents. Alexander's death in 323 BC transforms stability into chaos as his generals divide the empire with swords rather than treaties. Antigonus One-Eye seizes Sardis, holding it against Lysimachus, who claims inheritance through proximity. The city changes hands 5 times in 20 years, each transition marked by executions of previous administrators and confiscation of wealth that diminishes with every plunder. Citizens learn to bury their gold deep, to speak carefully around changing authorities, to survive through adaptation rather than resistance. The earthquake of 280 BC strikes at dawn, the earth splitting with sounds like thunder, while buildings that survived centuries collapse in moments. The palace where Croesus once counted his treasures slides down the Acropolis in an avalanche of marble and memory. Thousands die in their beds as homes become tombs, their screams muffled by tons of rubble that will take months to clear. The Pactolus River changes course, its golden sands diverted into new channels that bypass traditional collection points, as if nature herself has decided to end Sardis's ancient privilege. Reconstruction begins immediately under Seleucid patronage, the new city following Greek urban planning, with straight streets intersecting at right angles. The gymnasium that rises from the ruins covers 5 acres, its columned courtyards providing space for athletic training and philosophical discussion. Young men who exercise here speak Greek rather than Lydian, their education shaped by Homer and Plato rather than ancestral traditions that fade with each generation. The theatre carved into the hillside seats 20,000, its performances spreading Hellenistic culture to audiences who applaud in a language their grandparents wouldn't recognize. In 1880 BC, Rome defeats Antiochus III at Magnesia, the peace treaty transferring Lydia to Pergamon as reward for alliance with the victors. King Eumenes II transforms Sardis into a showcase of Hellenistic architecture, his building program creating monuments that proclaim cultural sophistication while acknowledging political subordination. The marble synagogue constructed during this period reflects the city's cosmopolitan character. Jewish merchants worshipping alongside Greek philosophers and remnant Lydian priests who maintain mystery cults in caves where ancient gods receive secret devotions. The royal mint continues operations under each successive regime, though the coins now bear portraits of Hellenistic kings rather than Lydian lions. The technology that revolutionized commerce serves new masters with unchanged efficiency. Standardized currency enabling trade networks that connect Atlantic shores to Central Asian steppes. Local merchants adapt to each change of administration, their account books recording transactions in talents and drachmas, while memories of Electrum status fade into legend. Attalus III's death in 133 BC brings unexpected transformation. The last Pergamene king wills his entire kingdom to Rome, his testament avoiding succession wars while acknowledging inevitable absorption by the rising Western power. Sardis becomes part of Asia province without resistance, its citizens understanding that fighting the Republic would achieve nothing except destruction. The transition occurs through legal procedures rather than military conquest. Roman efficiency replacing Hellenistic elegance in administrative buildings, where tax collectors now occupy throne rooms. Greek inscriptions carved over Lydian texts. Roman additions modifying Hellenistic structures, each civilization building upon previous foundations rather than destroying them completely. A carved relief shows Cybele seated beside Artemis and Athena, the goddesses sharing space that reflects religious syncretism born from pragmatic accommodation rather than theological conviction. The Lydian language survives only in rural villages where elderly priests maintain prayers their grandchildren don't understand. Urban youth study rhetoric in Greek and law in Latin, their ambitions directed toward careers in Roman administration, rather than preserving ancestral traditions. The transformation from kingdom to province completes not through dramatic conquest, but through gradual cultural absorption that leaves buildings standing while emptying them of original purpose. By 100 BC, visitors to Sardis see a thoroughly Hellenized city where Roman authority operates through Greek institutional forms. The gymnasium trains young men for imperial service. The theatre presents plays that blend Greek tragedy with Roman spectacle. The marketplace uses coins that carry Latin inscriptions around Greek imagery. The golden streams that created Lydian wealth still flow, but their treasure now serves distant masters whose capital lies beyond seas that ancient kings never imagined crossing. The earthquake strikes Sardis in 17 AD, with force that makes previous disasters seem like gentle tremors, the ground opening to swallow entire neighborhoods, while survivors flee toward hills that themselves crack and slide. Emperor Tiberius, reading reports in his villa on Capri, immediately forgives 5 years of taxes and sends 10 million sesterces for rebuilding. Generosity that transforms grateful subjects into loyal citizens who erect statues honoring their distant benefactor. The new city that rises follows Roman engineering, with aqueducts bringing mountain water to public fountains, sewers carrying waste to distant fields, and bathhouses where citizens wash away more than dirt. Their immersion in Roman luxury completing cultural transformation begun centuries earlier. In 60 AD, a tent maker named Paul walks the royal road towards Sardis, carrying letters to one of the 7 churches mentioned in Revelation. The congregation he addresses includes descendants of Lydian nobles, Greek merchants, Jewish scholars, and Roman administrators, their shared faith creating unity that transcends ethnic divisions. They gather in houses where Christian symbols hide behind conventional decorations, their worship conducted in Greek while incorporating melodies that might echo Lydian hymns, whose words are forgotten, but whose rhythms persist in cultural memory. The Pactolus still carries gold in quantities that barely justify collection, its diminished flow reflecting exhaustion of deposits that once funded empires. Children wade through waters their ancestors treated as sacred, finding occasional flakes that grandmothers fashion into jewelry, while telling stories of Croesus that blend history with fairy tale. The mint operates sporadically, producing bronze coins for local circulation, while silver and gold arrive from distant mines that dwarf anything Lydia ever produced. Marcus Aurelius visits in 175 AD, the philosopher-emperor pausing at Sardis while campaigning against Parthian resurgence. He writes in his Meditations about the ruins of Croesus's palace, visible stone reminders that wealth and power dissolve like morning mist. His observations carry no mention of Lydian invention of coinage, that revolutionary innovation having become so fundamental to civilization that its origins seem irrelevant, like questioning who first discovered fire or invented the wheel. By 200 AD, the last speaker of Lydian dies in a mountain village, taking with her songs that preserved memories of independence. Her grandchildren speak Greek at home and Latin in public, their identity thoroughly Roman, despite ancestral claims that reach back before Troy fell. The transformation is complete, not through violence, but through absorption, so gradual that each generation barely notices what distinguishes them from their parents has vanished in their children. Still, across the empire, from Britain to Egypt, from Hispania to Syria, every transaction uses coined money whose concept originated in those Lydian workshops. The denarii that pay legions on Hadrian's wall, the auri that purchase Egyptian grain, the sestertii that change hands in Gallic markets, all carry the invisible inheritance of electrum status, first hammered beside the Pactolus. When Constantine establishes the gold solidus that will anchor Byzantine economy for centuries to come, he unknowingly continues tradition begun when Lydian metallurgists solved the problem of standardized value. The phrase rich as Croesus spreads through the empire's languages, spoken in Rome's forums and Athens' academies, whispered in Alexandria's libraries and Antioch's marketplaces. Medieval chroniclers will preserve it in manuscripts. Renaissance scholars will debate its origins. But in this moment of Roman supremacy, it simply exists as accepted truth, that once there lived a king whose wealth surpassed all measure, whose kingdom created something that outlasted gold itself. In Sardis, the theatre still fills for performances, though audiences no longer understand references to Lydian kings that playwrights occasionally include. The gymnasium trains athletes who compete in games honoring Roman emperors rather than ancient gods. The synagogue, expanded under Roman patronage, serves a community that includes converts whose ancestors worshipped Cybele. Each stone structure rises from foundations laid by previous civilizations, creating architectural palimpsests where careful observers might trace the story of empire's evolution. The last Lydian inscription, discovered centuries later in a forgotten tomb, ends mid-sentence, its author interrupted by death or circumstance that prevents completion. The words speak of golden rivers and great kings, of lions that once roared from palace walls, of a time when Sardis commanded respect from rising sun to setting moon. But the stone breaks where meaning matters most, leaving future readers to imagine what final wisdom the carver meant to preserve. The golden streams that created kingdoms flow on, indifferent to human ambition, their waters carrying memories too ancient for words. Where once kings counted wealth in talents of gold, where inventors first guaranteed value with royal stamps, where merchants discovered that trust could be minted like metal, only scattered stones remain to mark the graves of empires. The Lydian kingdom has become what all kingdoms become, dust that enriches soil where new civilizations will rise, carrying forward innovations whose origins they will forget, until they too return to Earth that remembers everything and explains nothing.